All right, so let's start with the big story that we are tracking on WION at this hour, where just a week after North Korea launched what it claimed to be a hypersonic missile, this morning, North Korea has again fired what it is describing to be a ballistic missile into the Eastern Sea. The latest launch by nuclear-armed North Korea underscores what leader Kim Jong-un had vowed during his New Year's address, and that is to bolster the military capabilities of the North as a part of its policy priorities for the year 2022. Now, North Korea had fired a single ballistic missile from an inland area to its eastern sea. South Korea and also the US military are both analyzing this particular launch that has taken place earlier today. However, it is not immediately known as to how far the weapon in fact flew.
북한 탄도미사일 발사와 관련돼서는 한미 정부 자산에 의해서 탐지가 되었습니다. 그 근거로 해서 국방부가 발표한 것이고요. 세부 내용에 대해서는 지금 현재 한미 정보당국 간에 정밀 분석 중에 있다라는 말씀을 드리겠습니다.
Meanwhile, Japan's Prime Minister's office and also Defense Ministry has said that the weapon was possibly a ballistic missile.
事態において、北朝鮮が、継続してミサイルを発射しているということ、このことは極めて遺憾なことです。政府としましては、これまで以上に警戒監視強めていきたいと進めているところでありますが、いずれにせよこの発射の詳細については。
And he also further added that officials were in fact checking the safety of ships and aircraft around Japan. And according to the Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida, there have been no immediate reports of disruption or damage. And this is Pyongyang's second test in a span of 6 days. It also has come after 6 countries, including the United States and Japan, had urged North Korea to cease its destabilizing actions and engage in meaningful dialogue towards shared goals of complete denuclearization of the Korean peninsula. Meanwhile, experts are of the opinion that North Korea is just a few years away from acquiring a credible hypersonic missile. And North Korea's advancing nuclear arsenal is the core of North Korean leader Kim Jong-un's leadership that he's been in power since for the last 10 years. Now, during his 10-year rule, he's conducted a large number of weapons tests. However, despite the missile launches, the country's economy has faltered very severely in the past few years. Firstly, because of the sanctions by the Americans, and also because of the COVID-19 pandemic in the last 2 years. All right, now to get us more updates in terms of what's in fact happened with this missile launch as a test that was conducted by North Korea earlier this morning, we are joined in by our correspondent Phoebe Amoroso, who is joining us live from Tokyo. Thank you very much indeed, Phoebe, for joining us on this broadcast on WION. Now, according to information that has come in, this missile test was carried out by North Korea roughly at about 7:27 a.m. earlier this morning. This would have been a time when everyone would have been getting ready for their morning work, and here we have this test that was conducted by the North Koreans. What more do we know of this projectile that was launched by the North Koreans? Right, there seems to be a bit of an issue in the line with my colleague Phoebe Amoroso. We'll try connect with my colleague again. But this of course, is the latest that is coming in from North Korea, where a missile has been tested earlier this morning. And at this point of time, it is not very clear as to what exactly has transpired. Why has North Korea decided to carry out a missile launch? But remember, this is a missile test that has taken place by the North Koreans in a second one in a span of 6 days. And this, of course, is in keeping with the message that the North Korean leader Kim Jong-un had to address to his nation as a part of his New Year's address, where he had said that as a policy, North Korea will further bolster its missile defense system And that's precisely what it is doing. Ever since Kim Jong-un has been in charge of the North Korean nation in the last 10 years, North Korea has been making great advances in terms of its missile technology. It has also acquired nuclear weapons, and this is a serious cause of concern for other nations in the vicinity, like South Korea, like Japan, and indeed the United States as well, that under Donald Trump had been negotiating very actively with Kim Jong-un to try and reach a solution for a denuclearized Korean peninsula. So this, of course, is the latest bit of information that has come in, where North Korea has fired a ballistic missile, what is suspected to be a case of a ballistic missile. It carried out the launch, according to reports that are coming in, at about 7:27 a.m. earlier this morning. And according to information that's being put out by the militaries within the region, such as South Korea and also the Japanese Coast Guard, this object is said to be some kind of a ballistic missile-like object. I'm told that my colleague Phoebe Amoroso is live with us back again. Good morning to you, Phoebe. What more do we know about this missile launch by the North Koreans?
So what we know so far is that it flew around 700 kilometers towards the Sea of Japan, but falling outside of Japan's exclusive economic zone. And according to South Korean media, it flew at roughly the same distance as the missile that North Korea test launched last week, but at 10 times the speed of sound. Now, we've heard some very strong condemnation of North Korea's actions. Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida has called the repeated launches extremely regrettable and says that the Japanese authorities are closely monitoring the situation to see if they can determine more details. And Japan's chief cabinet secretary has used some very strong language condemning the launch, but also saying that this is a threat not only to Japan but to the security of the entire region. Now, the timing of this launch is not coincidental. Analysts say it has both military and political motives, and the political motive being that it comes just a day after the United Nations Security Council held an emergency meeting to respond to North Korea's previous missile launch last week. So we saw the US, France, the UK, Japan, Ireland and Albania come together and issue a joint statement condemning North Korea's actions. Also, the US ambassador to the UN has said that these repeated tests could lead to a miscalculation and an escalation of the situation. And we're seeing moves across the region to really try and respond to any kind of future threat. Just last week, Japan and the US signed a defense deal to jointly develop counter-hypersonics technology. So there is growing concerns about Pyongyang's actions.
And also, Phoebe, the timing of this missile launch is a very interesting one. Analysts are talking about a whole host of different reasons as to why North Korea may be indulging in these missile tests at a time, especially when North Korea has been battered economically by the COVID-19 pandemic. Is this an attempt by Kim Jong-un to somehow try and rally his people behind him by carrying out these missile launches?
Absolutely, certainly. Many observers are seeing the situation in that light. North Korea is going through a very difficult time. It's implemented some of the most strict, the strictest COVID-19 rules and regulations in the world, completely closing its borders. And that means there's been a huge food shortage in the country. So we really heard a shift in rhetoric when Kim Jong-un gave his New Year's speech to the country. And instead of hearing a lot of fiery language, very aggressive and assertive on the international stage and saying he was going to build up the nuclear arsenal, although he did say would be strengthening the defense, there was a big focus rather on the economy and the food shortages that North Korea is experiencing. So many analysts do see this as a distraction and a way to try and shore up his support and get people to rally behind him during this incredibly difficult time. There's also been the significant date of Kim Jong-un's birthday last weekend. And so this follow-up missile launch may have already been planned. It's difficult to say, but certainly it is sending a signal of his ongoing power.
Absolutely, indeed. My last question to you, Phoebe, is, analysts are also talking about that this could, of course, be Kim Jong-un's way of sending the message across to Washington that he is actually now ready to negotiate with Washington again. There's been a change of guard since last year under Donald Trump. Kim Jong-un had met the former American president 3 times. So at this point of time, is there any indication at all that the United States and North Korea could in fact, sit down for significant levels of talks?
Well, talks have been at a standstill since the negotiations between Kim Jong-un and former President Trump fell apart in 2019. And many observers really feel that it's going to take a lot to get North Korea back to the table. Back in 2018, 2019, when these historic summits took place, there was a lot of fanfares. It really was a historic moment, and Kim Jong-un certainly enjoyed a lot of international attention. But given that North Korea has said that it will not go to the negotiating table unless the US lifts sanctions, it doesn't look like there will be any progress. The US has said it's willing to talk, it's open to dialogue, but has not made any move to suggest it will lift sanctions and head in that direction. And essentially, Kim Jong-un has just celebrated 10 years in power, and he really is looking to tighten his control. He's made 2 public promises that he will build up North Korea's nuclear arsenal as well as develop the economy. Now, after these historic summits, there's been a very difficult time with COVID, so it's kind of been on the downhill trajectory. So if he can consolidate his power and keep control, he can go forward with the aim of delivering on those promises to the public. And currently, negotiations with the US is not a direction in which he could be seen to be shoring up his power domestically.
Absolutely indeed. Thank you very much indeed, Femi Avaroso, for joining us and getting us all those updates then. WION is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news on the move.